Was the obvious difference between the riot that happened on January 6th and the 500-odd that you correctly cite as concerning and damaging to America, to our psyche, to our physical well-being, is that this was a riot that was unleashed, incited, and inspired by the President of the United States, which targeted the heart of American democracy.
The President didn't say, no, you can, that's your opinion. The President said peacefully, no, stop. The President said peacefully, patriotically march to the Capitol. That's your opinion. I don't even want to go down that road. That's not the question tonight. The question is this corrupt committee. The question is why this riot and not 574 other riots. The question is there any privacy in this country anymore, or do they get to release thousands more of individual private citizens' texts?
I beg you, Sean, to remember the frame of mind you were in when you wrote that text on January 6th, and when Laura did, and when Brian did, and when Don Jr. did. Remember the concern you had. Remember the frustration at our beloved 45th president.
Yeah, because I wanted a riot to end.
How can he be doing this? Why doesn't he say something? Why?
Okay, but the point is he did.
You saw unfolding before unfolding before your very eyes an attack on democracy.
Let me give it to Dan.
An attack on the Constitution. An attack on the capital of the United States of America.
He said peacefully, and then he did do it. Dan, you have less than a minute. We're running out of time.
Geraldo, we've been arguing about this forever. The backstabbing of the president you're engaging in is really disgusting. It's really vile that you pretend to be this guy's friend and you continue to do this.
I resent that. I supported Donald Trump.
On tape.
I supported Donald Trump until he abandoned democracy.
Let me respond.
He abandoned the election results. And he refused to accept the will of the American people.
You heard it.
Nobody can hear you. We gotta leave it there.
And you stabbed him in the back. You heard it.
Thank you.
It's pretty telling that as soon as Hannity hears even the mildest acknowledgement of the fact that Donald Trump is responsible for the events of January 6th, he immediately melts down and does whatever he can to keep Geraldo quiet. Because if there's one thing that we know the right absolutely hates, it's censorship. Now, this is especially significant because it was just revealed through the release of Mark Meadows' text messages to the January 6th committee that Sean Hannity himself had been offering up advice on January 6th for Trump, saying, quote, can he make a statement, ask people to leave the Capitol? Meaning that Hannity acknowledges that they were there on Trump's behalf and on Trump's orders. Think about it. If these people weren't there because of Trump, why would Hannity want Trump to make a statement? What would a Trump statement do for people who aren't even there for him? In other words, from the privacy of his own texts, when he wasn't performing for his marks, he was content to acknowledge the truth. But now that he's on air and he goes back to his role of dutiful Republican mouthpiece, well, suddenly it was just a peaceful protest, and the real problem here is Black Lives Matter and Antifa and anyone aside from our deity, Donald Trump. And by the way, of course Hannity pivots to those, quote, other riots and tries to draw that false equivalency. As if this grown-ass man honestly doesn't understand the difference between a civil rights march, or how unfortunately those demonstrations can turn violent, and the President of the United States fomenting an insurrection at the US Capitol to subvert the election results, force the Vice President to anoint him the winner while his supporters seek to hang him if he doesn't comply, not to mention assassination attempts on other elected officials, including the Speaker of the House. If Sean Hannity thinks that these two are the same, then he's an absolute moron. Hannity goes on to complain that there's no privacy because private citizens' texts were released, a reference in part to his own texts, along with others like Laura Ingraham and Brian Kilmeade at Fox, Don Jr., Jim Jordan, and other Republican lawmakers. But here's the thing that Hannity doesn't seem to understand. Criminal activity is not protected. If you're being investigated for a crime like, oh, I don't know, unleashing an insurrection on the seat of our democracy for the sole purpose of undermining a free and fair election, then you surrender your right to that privacy. Hannity literally says, is there any privacy in this country anymore? As if the issue here is that everyone else overstepped by exposing his texts to the guy trying to stage a coup, as if that's the issue here, the sanctity of Hannity's text messages. If Sean Hannity wants to keep his texts private, might I suggest not offering PR to the guy trying to overthrow the government? I found that, personally, That's been a helpful strategy for me to keep my text messages private. And by the way, the same goes for all of these Republicans desperately citing executive privilege to hide their communications with Trump. Again, executive privilege doesn't shield you in the event of criminal behavior. And inciting an insurrection is criminal behavior. Storming the Capitol is criminal behavior. Trying to undermine an election is criminal behavior. I know it might not seem like criminal behavior because Republicans are engaged in a perpetual messaging war to convince themselves and their supporters that it was all justified and noble, but it wasn't justified in the slightest. And pretending that regular government processes apply in instances of criminal activity isn't going to will that reality into existence. But what's most telling in this clip is that Dan Bongino's major issue isn't the attack on the Capitol, it's not the attempts to undermine an election, it's not the fact that his colleagues were acting as a crisis comms team for the President of the United States during an insurrection that he himself incited. His beef here is that Geraldo is backstabbing Trump, and that really does sum up the entire platform of the Republican Party. Trump can do no wrong, and he deserves unlimited fealty. I mean, honestly, if you're not willing to criticize the guy for inciting a coup, then let's be honest, you are perfectly fine to be his doormat. You are a sycophant and nothing more. That is what the GOP has devolved into. That the one and only issue that they care about protecting is eliminating any dissent within the ranks and ensuring that when it comes to Donald Trump, the entire party is willing to heed his every order. I know people throw around the word cult. This is a cult. And of course these Republicans will couch their support of Trump in language like, he's a patriot, but there is nothing patriotic and frankly, nothing conservative about applauding a guy who tried to stage a coup. In fact, there's a clause in the Constitution forbidding exactly that. These people aren't conservatives or constitutionalists or whatever other labels they hide behind. They are Trump lackeys. That's it. Trump says jump, they say how high. They grovel at the shoes of a wannabe despot because they think he's a good vessel to achieve their goal of absolute power. If they're looking for an authoritarian, there are plenty of countries they can try out. But someone should let these patriots at Fox know that that's not how it works in a democracy. To see more videos like this, click the subscribe button right here on this screen. And if you want to support my work, subscribe to my podcast, No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen. I cover the most important stories each week, and my guest is always one of the top political figures, including Vice President Kamala Harris, Jen Psaki, Elizabeth Warren, Pete Buttigieg, Nancy Pelosi, Katie Porter, Cory Booker, and so many more. The podcast link is also right here on this screen, so give it a listen and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.